Hi, Kimberly. It's Tuesday. With Thanksgiving just a few days away, I figured I should talk about what I'm thankful for. We're also buying a house, and as part of that process, I had to deal with some pretty painful memories from my past. But before I get all weepy, last week you asked me which lie from the one thing jumped out to me and has impacted my life the most. There are a lot of lies and cognitive biases that Keller calls out in the book. However, the one I think that impacted me the most was probably from chapter 7. The one describing how willpower isn't always on will call. I used to think that willpower was something that was infinitely available, and that it was really just a function of character and strength of will. That if I just tried harder or was more diligent or more disciplined, that I would have more willpower. And because of that, there was a lot of self-hate and loathing that came out of it, but more on that in a minute. The fact is that willpower on demand is scientifically proven to be not true. Willpower is actually a function of how well rested and fueled your brain is. Even small amounts of effort can diminish your glucose stores, which will reduce your ability to exert willpower. When our brains are running low on blood sugar, the first area to be impacted is our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our finer reasoning and motor skills. Sugar water. Because I am running low on glucose and it is late. When our brains are running low on blood sugar, the first area to be impacted is our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our reasoning and our decision-making skills. So Keller claims that managing willpower is actually more akin to managing fuel consumption in like a high-powered gas vehicle, like a Hummer. You wouldn't want to just sit there and idle or just drive around the block. You want to actually use that energy for some real work. I like his recommendation that you build your day around when you have the most willpower. This is usually after sleeping, resting, and eating meals. So it's not essential that I wake up at dark 30 and engage in some elaborate morning routine. It's really just an expenditure of willpower. It's actually better if I wake up rested and engage in some exercises that focus my mind, but then allow me to transition directly into whatever my most important task is, my one thing, so that I can expend the willpower on that one thing efficiently before I open myself up to distractions. Of course, this is a lot easier said than done. My typical routine usually involves me rolling over, grabbing my cell phone, looking at Facebook and emails until the light from the screen wakes me up because I haven't gotten to bed early and I'm not well rested enough. I roll out of bed, get in the shower, jump onto my computer and get to work right away, usually engaging in the most menial things that I possibly could, like reading my Slack messages or reading more email. Of course, those non-pressing issues eventually give way to something that's really pressing, and then the rest of my morning's just shot. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to get to my one thing sometime after lunch, when I've gotten another shot of glucose, and my mind's a little bit more rested and focused. The other thing that Keller did point out, which I thought was really interesting, is how when your brain is running low on fuel, your decision-making process will actually go to a default. You don't necessarily just completely lose your ability to make decisions, but you go to whatever is easiest or most comfortable for your brain. So figuring out what those default actions are and being able to train that over time actually might be something really worthwhile looking into. And here is where the self-loathing comes into play. Last night I was reading Michaela, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, followed up by the always insightful Oh, the Places You'll Go. The combination of these two was really a 1-2 gut punch emotionally for me. The last page in 'Twas was a Christmas note from my parents in 2001. If you remember, I had just gotten home from Walter Reed Hospital and my life was pretty much in pieces. So reading this was depressing to say the least. So as Dr. Seuss says, you can get all hung up in a prickly perch and your gang will fly on. You'll be left in a lurch. And that's exactly what happened to me in 2001. From my prickly perch in Walter Reed Hospital, I got to witness the September 11th attacks, after which my classmates continued to fly on and prepare for war that we all knew was inevitably coming. Those are some pretty dark and depressing days for me. I did a lot of beating myself up about things that were really outside of my control. I was really depressed and definitely not making good decisions for my future health and happiness. So I've always really connected with Other Places You'll Go. I love Dr. Seuss, you know that. But this time around when I was reading it to Michaela, I didn't just connect with the sadder, more depressing aspects of the story, but I started to notice the uplifting aspects of it even more so. And I think that's because of a lot of the changes that I've seen in my life the last couple of years. I mean, we can all relate to the hard times. That's life, right? Everyone experiences lurches and slumps and fears. However, this time around, I've been reading the Motivation Manifesto by Brandon Bouchard. It's a really thought-provoking book, but the chapter that was really speaking to me while I was reading Michaela her bedtime story is chapter 2, on fear. Brendan starts the chapter with a quote from Seneca. "He who is brave is free." I like his different examinations of fear and how they affect us, and this quote especially cut me pretty deep. We are not slaves to our history. We can be freed by our conscious thoughts and disciplined habits. Fearful people tend to be shaped by past interactions. As a former soldier, I always considered myself to be brave. However, if I'm really honest with myself, I made a lot of decisions based out of fear. My default impulse has been fear-based until about 2 years ago when I really started to focus on my mindset and emotional intelligence. Even then, bravery was just a side effect of me deciding to become more in tune with my emotions and confronting my fears through taking massive action. It wasn't necessarily me deciding that I wouldn't be fear-based. I guess to tie this all up, Dr. Seuss is reminding us that life is a series of high heights and gut-wrenching lows. Things are often out of our control, and the only thing that we really do get to control is our reaction to the situation. The Motivation Manifesto is warning us that that reaction might probably be fear-based, and if so, could be self-limiting or even self-destructive. The only way to combat this is to take control of your actions, lest we become ruled by our fears. And Keller's advice in The One Thing, to wisely use our daily allotment of willpower, is especially important if our default actions are still fear-based. Of course, those defaults can change, and I know that my defaults today are a lot different than they were a couple of years ago. So now for some gratitude and a happy ending for this sad story. I am grateful for all the sages who have guided me away from a fate of habitual fear, depression, and loneliness. You, Michaela, Timothy, my parents, our family, our friends, all the people that I've ever interacted with or observed. Everyone has provided me little bits of wisdom and guidance that have helped me get from those dark days to a life that I fully enjoy today. To borrow a phrase from last week's video, you're the sages I needed when all I had in my head were saboteurs. You're the sages that gave me a safe place to heal, or reminded me that I'm still worthy of love when no one else could. You are the sages that pushed me to move past my fears, or inspired me to want more for my future. You are the sages that gave me grace beyond measure, and continue to do so. I am grateful for the overwhelming number of sages that have touched my life. So, Kimberly, I have one question for you this week. What are you grateful for? I'll see you Friday. Happy Thanksgiving.